So you see, Garfield, even tonight, we've mapped and we've traced some of our history, and yet we continue setting history even today. And we want to thank you all for being a part of it. Coming up next, we have a very special presentation. I believe a challenge is going to be issued to us as we go forth as a people. It's going to be made by Mr. Walter L. Fields, who serves as the Executive Director of NorthstarNews.com. He's well known here in the New Jersey area, and we want you to put your hands together and let's give him a warm welcome as he makes this presentation.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
When I pulled into the parking lot, I could not believe what I saw. It's Saturday night and a public library is packed. And we're celebrating Black History Month. That's a reason to applaud. I am really thankful for being invited here tonight because family is such an important part of my life. When I saw the veterans being honored, it really touched me. My great-grandfather was a Civil War veteran, Union Army, slave who escaped North Carolina to fight for his freedom. His name is now enshrined on the National African American Civil War Museum in Washington, D.C. My aunt, Doris Murphy Smith, was in the Navy. She was among the first Black women who were inducted into the Navy WAVE program during World War II. My father was a member of the United States Army, fought in segregated troops in European theater. My brother is a Marine. I have an uncle who was a United States Marine. My cousin in North Carolina is a graduate of the Air Force Academy, and he's a state senator in North Carolina. So the military has played an important role in my family, so I appreciate all of you who have served. Let me also say something about family. It touched me when I saw so many connected people receive awards. I lost my mom this past September, and I'm a mama's boy. And my mom was my everything. I lost my dad when I was 12. He died from cancer. So my mom principally raised me. And I would not be here today had it not been for my mom. My mom only had a high school education. My dad only had an 8th grade education. But every child, 6 of us in our family, had an opportunity to go to college because they felt it was that important. I had an opportunity to go to Baltimore and graduate from Morgan State University, went to New York University, graduated with my master's degree, was a National Science Foundation Fellow at the City University of New York. So I believe that without family, you can't succeed. You can, but it's incredibly difficult if you don't have them. I'm not going to take up a lot of time tonight because it's been a long program, but Reggie said I could tell the truth. And since we are in a public library, which is supposed to be the house of truth, the other house of truth, of course, is supposed to be the church, and unfortunately we have problems in both areas. But let me speak from truth in terms of why we're here tonight. First of all, Black history is not an American celebration. Black history is a global celebration. The imprint of Africa is on this world. And whether you believe it or not, Black history touches every part of this globe. And we need to recognize that because in the United States, I think we too often think of Black History Month and only think of the American experience. Our experience predates this country. We didn't come here as slaves, we came here enslaved, and there is an important difference. Our history is so rich and deep around this world that we need to begin to acknowledge the global Black African footprint on the world. So Black History Month is not a United States celebration in my mind. We're living at a time, unfortunately, that is very troubling. We seem to be going back to a day that we had previously visited after the Civil War. And as you look around, the current state of affairs is very dismal. And when Reggie said I could speak the truth, he said, what were you going to talk about? I said, well, I want to talk about what empire you're building. Because so many folks have been caught up in this new television show, Empire. And so much conversation has been had around this singular television program. And I think part of it is the reality of the silly season in America. that was so caught up with a television program, whether it's Empire or Scandal or internet gossip or wondering what Jay-Z and Beyonce are doing, that we don't understand that we're on a sinking ship. And unless we wake up, we're all going under. And right now, we're just treading water, trying to hold our nose above the waterline, but we're sinking fast. So let me say a couple of things. Mass incarceration. We have so disproportionately harmed the black community through mass incarceration that we have generations of people who are ineligible to vote, who cannot serve on a jury, and who are permanently injured in the labor market and they can't get a job. When you look at that population, it's not just young black men, it's young black women. They are a faster proportion of the prison population for civil rights. We have a situation where black children are being disproportionately suspended and expelled from schools for minor offenses. Offenses that their white peers are allowed to stay in school, black children are being booted out. We don't have a dropout problem in America, we have a push-out problem. We have a school system that is categorically pushing black children out the door. And those that aren't pushed out, some are choosing to leave because they're smart enough to know that they're not being educated in that building from 8 o'clock to 3 p.m. in the afternoon. We have policing in this country that's run amok. That if you're black, whether you're female or male, you're more susceptible to being stopped, more susceptible to being arrested, more susceptible to being harassed. That's a reality that we can't get around. I know it because I've been stopped several times. And it doesn't escape whether you live in Maplewood, Garfield, or Newark, New Jersey. If you're black, you are a target. It doesn't matter how many degrees you have. It doesn't matter what your address is, what your mama or your daddy did. If you are African American, you are susceptible to being stopped by police. We have a corrupted faith. We have churches that have lost their minds. And I'm a church boy. My grandmother was a deaconess in the Holiness Church in North Carolina. I am a member of Varick Memorial AME Zion Church in Hackensack, the oldest black church in Bergen County. That is my family's church. I have lived and breathed the church since I was a child, and I am disgusted by much of what I see in the church today. When I turn on the TV and I see a program, Preachers of Detroit or Preachers of Los Angeles, and folks are living in huge houses while their congregation is suffering, their mostly female congregation is suffering. When I see ministries that are more about collecting money than serving God's people, we've got a problem. If Jesus came back tomorrow, he wouldn't even recognize the church that folks claim they celebrate on Sunday in his name. It's a problem, folks, and we need to recognize it, because at one time the church was the anchor of the African American community, and now it's the anchor that is pulling the black community down. We have class dysfunction, particularly black middle class dysfunction. We got folks who are more interested in spending vacations in Martha's Vineyard than helping black children succeed. We got folks who put more money into their car than making sure some black child gets fed or is clothed. And that's the reality. We have lost our minds as a community because some of us have moved up and brought us down. My mother used to always tell us, no matter how high you get, don't get too cute, because you never know when you're going to come down. We have weak leadership. We have weak leadership. We have folks who are more interested in title than serving. We have folks who are more interested in being recognized than recognizing the suffering of others. And if we're going to be honest and say that we are a faith-driven people, our leadership does not look like the leadership of Jesus Christ if you're a Christian. And I speak from a Christian perspective. Jesus wasn't worried about hanging out in the mansion. When Jesus came into town, He hung out with the lowlifes. When he came into town and he saw Zacchaeus in a tree, who everybody hated because he was a tax collector, that's whose house he went to for dinner. Understand this, leadership is a privilege. And we need to start stripping that privilege from some folks. Because they're only there to serve themselves. And until we become honest and hold people accountable and call them out, things will not improve. Look, everybody has a need to be recognized and has an ego. But when you see the house burning down, it's time to pick up a bucket of water and start swinging it. You can't be so caught up in yourself that you don't understand that you're in the middle of a burning building. And that's where our leadership is today. And I say that as someone who has been active since I was a child. I was the youngest person in the city of Hackensack ever appointed to a city board. I was 13. That's because my mother would drop me off at City Hall when I was 12, because I would tell her that I needed to speak to the city council about things concerning young people and kids. She would drop me off and go home, and the city clerk, Doris Dukes, who was the first black clerk of the city of Hackensack, or Sissy Braithwaite, who we just lost, a Hackensack icon, they would bring me home. But I would attend city council meetings at age 12 because I wanted my city to understand that I had something to say. And the mayor, when I turned 13, said, if you got that much to say, you might as well be on the Youth Guidance Council, so we're going to appoint you. But I say that because I take leadership seriously. I take it very seriously. When I look at what's happening in our community, it's rarely a failure of the people, it's the failure of the people who are supposed to lead the people. And so if you want to celebrate Black History Month, look at strong leadership. And I'm not just talking about Dr. King, but Dr. King was certainly a strong leader. But Martin couldn't be the leader he was if there weren't other strong leaders around him. Because no one can lead singularly. So when you look at our history, we have a history of strong, community-oriented leadership. Many of the folks were unlettered, didn't have college degrees. We probably wouldn't have the voting rights we have today had it not been for Fannie Lou Hamer. Poor black woman from Mississippi who traveled here to New Jersey, 1964, Democratic National Convention to claim voting rights for black people in Mississippi. People like Ella Baker, and I'm using our women because our women don't get recognized enough. Ella Baker, who saw the importance of training young people, a graduate of Shaw University, so instrumental in the founding of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Harriet Tubman, rifle in hand, leading slaves to freedom. Frederick Douglass, who had the audacity at a 4th of July celebration to indict America by saying what to the slaves is the 4th of July. Malcolm X, who had the boldness to say we can't love anybody else unless we love ourselves. Strong leaders, willing to sacrifice, willing to die, willing to work for children. And I say that because, to me, that is the most important mission we have. And I'm glad to see children in the audience. We have so abandoned our children. When I look around the country and I hear the horror stories of what's happening to black children, it tears my heart apart. Black children being abused, being abandoned, being murdered. Black children who are so fearful of leaving their house to just go to school. And it always comes down to where are the adults? Because the children didn't fail, the adults did. Because too many adults are still trying to be children. And when we start having adults again, we'll be able to help our children. We've got a generation of black children who have been left behind by nobody but us. And we need to own up to that. Because if we don't love our children, don't expect the school teacher to love them. Don't expect the police officer to love them. Don't expect, the counselor to love them. We have to love them first. Finally, let me say this. The only way that you are here tonight is because you have a great community. Hearing the names called off and the accomplishments of people, I relate to that because I can say the same thing about growing up in Hackensack. One of our family friends was E. Frederick Morrow, the first African-American to serve in the White House, the executive office of the president under Dwight David Eisenhower. His sister, Nellie Parker, first black school teacher in Bergen County. We have an elementary school named after her in Hackensack. Herb Leverett, the first black city councilman in Hackensack, who happens to be my brother's godfather. Howard Gregory was the second black councilman and a close family friend. Reverend Fred Lagarde was one of Dr. King's chief lieutenants in the North, pastor of Community Baptist Church of Love in Patterson, where my grandmother Ethel Fields attended. His church was the last stop Dr. King made before he went to Memphis and assassinated.